battle lines are being drawn. In the meantime, Chinese naval surveillance ship docks in South African port. And remember, the BRICS nation, which includes South Africa. So China is expanding its influence globally. South Africa has courted criticism from the U.S. and its allies for refusing to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine and holding the naval exercise with several Russian and Chinese vessels off its east coast in February over the first anniversary of the outbreak of the conflict. Pretoria is currently contemplating whether to allow Russian President Vladimir Putin to attend a BRICS bloc summit that it will host in August. And keep in mind, it's been OPEC plus, and that plus is Russia. And it's been that way for a while. So this is not, everything seems to happen really slowly until it happens quickly. Russia, South Africa, China, to simulate air attacks in an exercise. The exercises known as Moshe 2 have been criticized by some South Africans' biggest trade partners, including the U.S. and the European Union, who have questioned the timing of the exercises, which take place 1 year after Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine. China simulates hitting key targets on Taiwan. China has simulated precision strikes against key targets on Taiwan and its surrounding waters during a second day of military drills. The drills, which Beijing has called a stern warning to the self-governing island, are a response to Taiwan's president visiting the U.S. last week. The U.S. is not going to let China tell us what we can and cannot do. Can you see this conflict brewing? China brokering a deal for Russia and Ukraine, but Russia's saying peace talks should be about the new world order. Any negotiation needs to be based on taking into account Russian interests, Russian concerns. It should be about the principles on which the new world order will be based. This had me a little concerned when I saw this, with lavish treatment of Macron, who is, by the way, pushing through pension reforms, whether the public likes it or not. Too bad, so sad. China's Xi woos France to counter the U.S. China's Xi Jinping has given French President Emmanuel Macron an unusually lavish welcome on a state visit, which, I like this, unusually lavish welcome, which some analysts see as a sign of Beijing's growing offensive to woo key allies within the European Union to counter the United States. And so what we're watching is China's making an attempt to shift the U.S. allies. And what did we show with this whole conflict? Is that we will use SWIFT, the U.S.'s global payment system, to control the outcome and make countries do what we want them to do. You have geopolitics and fragmentation emerge as serious financial stability threats. Rising tensions could trigger cross-border capital outflows and increased uncertainty that would threaten macro financial stability. Let's look at that, because we know a lot of the geopolitical issues between not just Russia and Ukraine, which frankly looks like a proxy war for China and the U.S., but even between China and the U.S. aside from that, that's heating up. It's heating up in the Middle East. It's heating up everywhere. And what their concern is that cross-border. So, okay, investors in the U.S. invest in stocks and bonds in China or other places. So if there's geopolitics that come into place, those funds don't flow as well as they would like them to. I definitely do think we've already started World War III, and I think that that's really more in, to be honest with you, in cyberspace. But for the public, we need boots on the ground war. We need something that people can see and say, oh, we're in war. So who's on board? In early March 22, the UN General Assembly passed a motion condemning Russian aggression against Ukraine, but some 35 member states abstained. Battle lines are being drawn. Now, the light blue are those that have abstained. If it's got a gray, they haven't voted. This is no, and of course that's Russia in there, so would be expected. But China abstained, right? So, no, we are in a race here. And the reason why Biden's shock and awe didn't have an impact is because Russia found new suppliers of their high-tech goods, imports, but also for their oil, etc. So, and who stepped in? China. Well, that's not a very big surprise. So you have Russia and China that have a very strong relationship, and they've gotten more and more integrated. Who's behind China? Who's stepping in with them? Well, Russia, look at the Russian economy. Yes, it really dumped in the beginning of the attack, but now it's been doing much better as it's found alternatives for both their imports as well as their exports. China is trying to have it both ways with Russia. That's our representative. We're there to be a crisis as a result of China's actions over Taiwan. That would have repercussions for quite literally every country on earth. So why is China buying so much gold? Why are global central banks on a massive global gold buying spree to the level that we haven't seen it since the 60s, when we were transitioning from at least a quasi-gold-backed standard into a pure debt-based standard? Right here. This is the biggest enemy. China, Russia, but also, like I said, I mean, you don't hear too much about India, but India has stepped in as well as China has for Russia's imports, exports to help them around the sanctions. So you have some very powerful alliances on that end as well. China's relations with Russia are rock solid as rock, China's top diplomat said during his visit to Moscow, as the two neighbors pledged broader strategic cooperation and coordination amid their escalating tensions with the West. China completes the first yuan-settled Ling trade. That is for natural gas. China has placed an emphasis on settling oil and gas trades in yuan in recent years in a bid to establish its currency internationally and to weaken, this is more to the point, to weaken the US dollar's grip on world trade. And so what we're really seeing here is power shifting. We've been talking about this for a number of years. But Chinese national oil company CNOOC and France's Total Energies have completed China's first yuan-settled liquefied natural gas LNG trade through the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange. Isn't that interesting? And again, China has placed an emphasis on settling oil and gas. These are critical natural resources that are physical. There's a finite amount of this. But what is particularly notable to me is that France was participating in this, and they're part of the euro. Saudi Aramco boosts China investment with 2 refinery deals. So can you see how this critical piece of U.S.'s remaining in control and power, can you see how that's shifting? The 2 deals, announced separately on Sunday and Monday, would see Aramco supplying the 2 Chinese companies with a combined 690,000 barrels a day of crude oil, bolstering its rank as China's top provider of the commodity. That's the important part in here. So the allegiance, the complete allegiance that the U.S. had with Saudi Arabia, gone. And it was the petrodollar that enabled the U.S. dollar to retain its status as the world reserve currency. So no longer do you have to use dollars for trade and energy. The deals are the biggest to be announced since Chinese President Xi Jinping visited the kingdom in December, where he called for oil trade in yuan, a move that would weaken the U.S. dollar's dominance in global trade. Beijing's secret role in the breakthrough shook up dynamics in the Middle East, where the United States was for decades the main deal maker. Oil sales to China have hit their highest level since the invasion of Ukraine, and their gold imports from Russia surged 750% last July. So we can see that China's actions do indeed support their words. We also see when they don't. And by that, I'm meaning we see what the central banks say, but we also see what the central banks do.